Scott Mosier. I work at Salesianum School as the athletic director. I also coach the soccer team there. And I'm fortunate enough to have a job at Delaware FC, a big youth soccer club. So I'm in a unique position where I get to see, I've been doing it for 20 years too, by the way. So I'm in a unique position where I get to see players that are 3 years old, 7 years old, like in the youth soccer world. And then I get to see them go all the way through 19, and I get the chance to coach a lot of them, or at least see them be coached and see them develop. So I get an opportunity to see their personalities at, say, 7, 8, 9 years old. And then I get a chance to see them at, say, 19 years old. And I get a chance to see how youth sport has helped or maybe hurt them as they went. So it's been a passion of mine to talk about youth sports in particular. My daughter's 15 now, and when she was 11 or 12, they were playing in regionals, a high-level soccer tournament, and I don't coach her, never did, and I'm standing next to a Division I coach, and he and I are watching the game. They're in the regional finals. If they win the game, they get to go to Texas for nationals in the Final Four nationally. Really big deal. 11 and 12-year-old girls. Goes to PKs. And then they all stand at midfield. Why, I don't know. But they stand way back at midfield. It's like 1,000 steps for girls that age. And they one at a time walk up to take penalty kicks. Every single player from both teams, as they walk up, are wiping away tears from their eyes because the intensity is so high. And I'm standing there with a fellow coach, and we just looked at each other and said, this isn't right? Like, girls walking up hysterically crying before they take a penalty kick at 11 years old. So, and of course it's my daughter, so there's definitely an attachment there. So, you know, it really made me think about youth sports and kind of what we're doing. I always have in the jobs I've had, but that's just a good example. So I want to talk a little bit about lessons we want our children to learn through youth sport, and then lessons maybe that are actually learned through youth sport, and discuss some of the pitfalls maybe that come along the way. So why do parents take their kids to the first soccer practice, right? We have meetings every year in the soccer club in particular, 9, 10, 11-year-olds, and we have a team meeting, and we say, okay, what do you want out of this youth sport? You're going down this road, say travel soccer. What are you looking for by the time your kids are, say, 17, 18, 19? And what do you think they say? Character development. They want to have fun. They want their kids to be socialized, right? Socialization for our 3-year-old program, we have about 80 3-year-olds in a 3-year-old program, is somebody else can take my ball and it's okay, right? That's huge learning for a 3-year-old at that age. So teamwork, physical fitness, character development, and a big one that they say at the end there, I should wear my glasses, is adversity. So ultimately, in some way, shape, or form, they say, I want my child to learn how to deal with adversity. And for me, that's a major, major point I would love for players that come through a program of mine to be able to deal with. Maybe the number one, if you ask me. Because if you can't deal with adversity sooner or later, your world stops for the most part, because sooner or later you're going to have some adversity. So how do you deal with that? And these are all the things all the time, every single year, every single team, parents will say, right? So that's where we're going to sort of start from. This is what we want to have happen for our young athletes that go through that. Got to talk about mental health. There's other talks that will get more into this. Very important in today's society, very important in youth sport in particular. But NCAA said 30% of college athletes have self-reported that they have bouts of depression or mental health issues. And those students at a higher rate, athletes are found to have a higher rate of mental health issues. So you're saying, wait, like we put them in youth sport and you go through this youth sport to learn characteristics and abilities to deal with the world. That's really what parents originally want out of youth sport. And then they go through youth sport And I'll use my daughter's team again as an example. You see them as 13, and they have as much anxiety, if not more anxiety than most, because of all the fears of losing or not playing well and the team, going against them or something along those lines. And it just, the two don't add up. And I think in today's society, when we talk mental health and we talk youth sport, such a popular activity, and those two don't add up, then that's a major issue for me, and it should be a major issue for everybody that's involved in youth sport, because we're not getting out of it what we want. So one of the issues is paid coaches. So youth sport, a lot of money goes to this multi-billion-dollar industry across the country, and for paid coaches, what are we asking them to do? So I have a staff of maybe 20 paid coaches. How do I evaluate those paid coaches? Am I evaluating for wins? Am I evaluating them based on them developing character, the kids having fun? So that's certainly a part of the process. And what do we profile on our website? So ultimately the question is, why is there higher mental health in athletics than anywhere else? And really the focal point today is there's higher mental health because we look at athletics as a result, not as a process. And that's really the main thing at a young age. Like when you go in and you have your child with you, they just got done playing a game, and you see grandmom and grandpop, then what's the first thing they ask them? Did you win? Did you score? Without fail, those are the first two questions that they ask, right? And that's fair. It's grandma and grandpop, right? So that's the first thing they ask. They might get to, did you have fun, right? But right away, kids learn that it's about the result, all right? So if athletics is a process, then if you view athletics as a process, then I think that's critical. So young athletes need to learn that it's a process. What better environment is it, athletics, than to learn through athletics that it's a process? So there's no real ramifications for athletes. Like I played in college, I heard a lot of other people talk about playing in college, and it's an intense environment. But really, does that influence your life? I take a lot from Gino Ariyama, UConn's women's coach. And he says before the finals, the NCAA finals, his pregame speeches, which I bought, and my team will know this now, they think I create this every year, but he says, your life will be no different if you lose this game tonight. And that's, for me, that's such a profound statement for dealing with coaches who don't feel that way. He says, you're still going to have your scholarship, you're still going to have work opportunities, you're still going to have your family around you, your friends, your teammates around you. Virtually nothing changes tomorrow morning if you don't win the national championship tonight. It'll be fun and all. Now, he might be the most competitive coach out there, because the smart thing about that is they're going to play better if they're not worried about that result. So another point that stuck with me years ago, maybe 20 years ago, Ahmad Rashad interviewed Michael Jordan and a whole list of top athletes. Roy Jones Jr., Warren Sapp, Derek Jeter, a whole group of them. And they asked, Ahmad Rashad asked a question, and he said, how do you all feel about losing? And went through one after the other. Of course, what do you think they said? I hate losing. Roy Jones Jr. said, if I lose against my 8-year-old daughter playing cards, I throw my cards, and I can't sleep at night, and everyone topped the other. And it finally got to Michael Jordan, and he said, nah, he said, I welcome losing. And everybody was like, you welcome losing? I'm surprised you say that, like you're notorious for being competitive and trying to win. And he said, nah, he said, I welcome losing. He said, and this is something that's always stuck with me, I've never been more motivated to get better than after I've lost. And anybody that's played on a team, if you play poorly and win, it doesn't have quite the same dig as if you lose. And if you lose, the next day, he trained harder. He was in the gym, he's trained harder to get better. And I thought, what a great opportunity, what a great way to approach athletics, in that you seek better competition to exploit your flaws so you can then be a better athlete, a better person, a better success. And like the penalty kick story, what age is it appropriate to go through this process? What age is too much? And I think if kids at a young age are taught that it's a process and it's not the result, then I'm hoping those girls aren't wiping away tears when they're walking up to penalty kicks. I'm hoping they're thinking, wow, this is cool. I remember my first year at Sally's, we were in the state finals 20 years ago, and we were up 2-1, gave up a late goal, goes to 2-2, and then we end up winning in overtime 3-2. But giving up that goal was traumatic. There was like 2 minutes left. We were about to win the state for the first time for the school in a long time. And then years later, I talked to somebody that was on the field, and he said, you know, when we came in after regulation, which was, I thought, a very traumatic time, he looked at his friends and said, isn't this awesome, seniors in high school? We get to play another 30 minutes with each other. Now, they almost won the state. And I look back on that, and I think that's just an awesome personality to have. And by the way, it's a really successful personality to have, to really focus on the enjoyment of sport. And so how do parents perceive failure? What if parents perceive failure as a negative, right? The ride home in the car. If parents perceive failure as a negative, then how's the child going to perceive failure? At what age does that start? You know, if there's a 3-year-old going to practice, that personality is started at 3. You got to do this and you got to do that. Literally at 3 and 4 years old, you hear parents talking to them about this. All right, and so what do we focus on, the process or result? And at a young age, if we can really make sure people are attuned to the process as opposed to the result, they're actually going to have more success. They're actually going to win more if they're less focused on that result. Think about somebody going up to shoot a basketball, a foul shot at the end of the game. What should they be focused on? Should they be focusing on the opportunity they have or the concern and anxiety if they miss? We want them to be focusing on that process, and that's an opportunity for them to get better. So another statistic, sports psych, high achievers have high motivation to achieve success and low motivation to avoid failure. And for me, what that means is high achievers spend all of their time on how to be successful. And they spend very little time on how not to fail, which to me makes sense. But when you think of, and I hear athletes talk and they say, I hate losing, hate losing, hate losing. And when you break that down to a youth, to like a 12-year-old age group, if there's a young player who hates losing, then and if they identify themselves as an athlete, if they miss the shot, if they lose, and their self-identification is I'm a good athlete or I'm a scorer, and they don't win the game, their whole personality crumbles, if that's what they stand for, if that's all they stand for. But if they have other things going on in their life and they don't identify themselves as just an athlete, then the process is a much easier process, and their life won't be over if they don't win the state championship. That's just a part of the process for them. And high achievers have demonstrated that they're going to focus more on being successful, and they're going to focus very little time on not being successful and failing. All right, so imagine a world where parents view adversity as productive. And by parents, I mean the students or the children of those parents view athletics as, and adversity in athletics as just a process for them to go to. And if they lose, imagine a parent at 9 years old, player going up to take a penalty kick, and them thinking, man, it'd be great if they missed this penalty kick. What a great opportunity for me to talk to that 9-year-old about what that means. How did you feel? What do you stand for? Like, are you going to work on it more? Were you nervous? Right? That's an opportunity that somebody that doesn't play an activity or play that sport they're not going to get. I'm a big advocate for youth sports, and I'm a big advocate for youth sports because we get to learn through something that really doesn't have any serious consequences for our lives later. They do at 9, but later in life, that's not. And if they can learn those principles there, then they're going to be better off. And people use athletics as practice to develop that personality. And institutionally management. We need to recognize it's really systemic in youth sports. It is a culture of paid sports, and with paid sports, I'm a part of it, so I can say it. And with paid sports, the hope is with the professionals, the hope is that they are focusing on the key points, and they're not focusing on the just winning. The problem is when you're trying to grow a business in youth sports and it becomes monetized, that inevitably you're talking about high level, you're talking about wins. And so going to websites and seeing what do you promote on the website for your youth sport, that's really going to dictate the principles of that club. So if I have 20 staff members and one guy's winning, am I going to pay him more? Is he a better staff member? But there might be a guy working with B and C teams that's creating all these really cool personalities on their team and working with them. Which one do I promote? And ultimately, as parents, which one are you going to put your kids into? So hopefully this gives you a little indication from my experiences that we really need to focus on athletics as a process for players to develop personality. And if we go back to the beginning of why you put your kids into sports in the first place, then it's going to make the parents and the coaches and the adults in the room, it's going to give them a better perspective on why we do youth sports to begin with. Thank you.